Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 251 of the Assorted Calibers Podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that has a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd. And with me tonight is the wonderful, the amazing, the fine-smelling, wonderful hostess in the world, Aaron Paulette. How you doing, Aaron?
So to quote Lloyd Bridges from the comedy Airplane, I picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue.
Yes. I fully identify with the feeling.
So, yeah, abbreviated version here. I don't remember if it was Friday night or if it was Saturday, but I started noticing that my computer was just acting a little funny, a little weird. It was taking longer to do things. Sometimes Windows Explorer would just, not respond. And, all right, that was annoying, but it had been a while since I had cleaned my hard drive and defragged it. I just figured it was getting junky. I needed to do that to optimize it, and it'd be all right. And so Saturday night comes along, and it's really slow. And so I decide right before I get online to do my nightly role-playing game that I've been running since like 2012. Well, different game system, but it's the same group of people. And so I decided I'm going to do a reboot just to, clear up some resources. And the computer gives me problems. I mean, the first time it's like non-system disk or disk error. Click any key to continue. Clicking any key to continue doesn't do anything, and I got no other disks in the drive. So, I have to do a hard power cycle just to get it up. And then it's a case of, well, I can have Discord going or I can have Google up. I don't know if I can have both, and it took me a while, but I was finally able to wrench some degree of success from this. And I had a game, even though I was like an hour late, and everyone was going, you better back that disc up. And I was like, I know. And so yesterday, I went to the Mart of Walls and picked up a doohickey that would enable me to clone my drive through USB, and then it would clone it onto a solid-state drive, and then I just plug that drive in directly, and it should be completely painless. And it wouldn't do that because the computer, the thing said, oh no, we found a bad sector, we can't copy it. Oh, okay. Well, I'm told that if I run check disk, that should be able to fix the thing and bypass the bad sector somehow, maybe recover some data. Okay, so I set that going, and I go to sleep at night, and I wake up in the morning, and it has finished the check disk. I don't know what the results are because it rebooted or whatever, and it's doing, again, that whole non-system disk or disk error. So I try to reboot it, and it's just not rebooting. It's not. So, the only thing I could think to do is I got to go get another computer. And yeah, I agonized for too long over this thing, because I could get an absolute, trash box of one that would get me online, but all the ones there are Windows 11, and I've been running Windows 10. And so, my thought was, if I can get, just a crappy computer going, and then I can dismount my hard drive from my original computer and then clone it, hook it up as a secondary and whatever. But then, I don't know, I just get this feeling that, I know, this story's going on way too long. I apologize. But I had a bad day and you're going to share in it. And so, I'm going, well, but what if I can't recover my computer? And, I'm not sure in terms of Windows 10 versus 11, if I do the thing and plug it in and whatever. And I also figure that if I get the computer out and running and it doesn't, I can't recover my old one, and I don't like the trash box, I couldn't very well return the one that I had already loaded up and personalized. Maybe Walmart would let me, I don't know. And so I actually got one that was more expensive, but one that I figured I could use for, I'm not a big gamer, but, I'm on Discord a lot, and I edit my audio and, well, to a certain extent, and, sometimes I record myself and blah, blah, blah. I figured, okay, I'll get a more expensive one just in case I get locked into this. And it took me a while, and I got it all set up, and that's how I'm here now. And the culmination of it is I have the old hard drive dismounted, and I've got it in an external thing, like a USB cradle, and I can't even get it to turn. Well, the external device thingy will turn on, but it's telling me, we can't access the drive. The entire thing's corrupted. and it's just, that is a 1 terabyte drive, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get anything back from it. Hooray. So that's been my day. That's been my weekend. I'm kind of fried.
By the way, do you have some off-site backups? Or is things like Aaron Paulette's big book of receipts in there, and who knows if it's coming back out?
Well, this is where I take a big bite of humble pie and admit that, no, I haven't been backing up my hard drive like I should have. Bad prepper. So, yeah, that's a lesson hard learned, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. I don't know if there's anything essential, but there's a lot of nice to have. It's like, do you know how long it takes to build a collection of clown porn? I'm just telling you, there's a lot that goes into that, and so that's lost. So you don't even know if I'm being sarcastic or not.
I don't even know. We joked about it before, and here it comes again. And you know what? I'm just going to be here in my happy place. And
yep. And so I don't know if I've lost anything truly irreplaceable, but it's a massive pain in my butt. And, having to reinstall all the programs and get everything set up. And so first of all, thank you for listening to me complain, all the listeners. Secondly, I don't know how good a job I'm going to do because I'm fried. I listened to the topics, the segments, and I may not do a good job.
It is understandable. When I heard that you were having major computer problems, I let the others know that I had given you a free pass to, if you want to say, I don't want to do it. You had every green light known to man.
So yeah, that's what's going on with me, and I'm not especially happy. But enough about me and my whining. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I am doing considerably better, but I am I am equally fried and tired, only because we had some family down for the weekend. My niece is graduating high school, and she wanted to tour one of the colleges in the Boston area and all that. So they came down, and we were doing sightseeing, and I was cooking and doing all that stuff. So I was running around a lot all weekend, and then of course now they're gone, and so now it's time to make beds and wash sheets and get everything set up, so that I like to keep it so that I can just immediately bring the guest bedroom to work if somebody's over and has a little too much to drink, or their car breaks down or something like that, and they need to spend the night. All right, cool, here's a bed, good night.
Bring the guest bedroom to work?
Well, so we've got Murphy beds in our so the third floor of our house we have it set up so that it is a family room most of the time, but in about 15 minutes I can convert it into a guest suite. And
okay, so you mean get it operational.
correct.
Okay, when I hear bring it to work, I mean, it sounds like you are bringing it to your place of employment.
I mean,
That's all.
technically.
Yeah, technically, you're a
But,
stay-at-home dad.
But yeah, so that just meant that I was stripping all the sheets and washing all the towels and then bringing the sheets back and just making them. I think we've got extra sheets. I don't know where they are. I just washed the sheets and put them back on. And so I just been running around doing house stuff all day, and like I just barely got all the segments listened to. And all. As a matter of fact, I have Oddball's segment sitting right here on the editor because I have just listened to it and have not yet put the music and done the final cleanups of it. So yeah, it's just been a busy day. But my my daughter and I my wife was staying late at work and she had a class that ends like right at dinner time. So I normally don't cook on Mondays. And so I said, you know what? Let's go to McDonald's because she was wanting McDonald's because the kid wants McDonald's. I can make all that stuff, but it'll be better and better for you. But oh well. So c'est la vie. And as we were walking home, we heard some loud bird chirping. And I'm like, what if there's like a bird nest nearby? And I'm looking around, didn't see anything. And finally, when I gave up, I just started walking. And my daughter went, "Oh, it's so cute." And there was a baby bird hopping over to us. And it hopped over and it was just yelling at us. And I'm like, I think I can pick it up. And it was like, just like fledgling levels, just fully feathered. And all that, and just like picked up this bird. It was a baby starling, and it was just chirping and yapping at us. She's like, "Can I hold it?" And I gave it to her. It immediately climbed up her arm and sat on her shoulder.
Aww.
And so she's like, "Can we bring it home?" And I'm like, "What's a wild animal? I don't necessarily want to do it. Looks like he fell out of the nest a little bit early, and he's not quite ready to fly, but he looks pretty close." And so so there was like a shrubby tree next to it. And so I set the bird in the tree and I said, there, he'll be safe up away from predators. And then, in the morning he can try again to flap. And there's other starlings up in the power lines above us. So, and they seem to be somewhat interested in us. So I'm like, they might even be like taking care of this bird. So I'll put it up on the tree. Well, the bird immediately flies out of the tree and lands on my shoulder. And just starts chirping at me. And I'm like, I guess and he's like nipping at my fingers like, where's the food? And I'm just like, well, he's clearly hungry. I guess we could bring him back and we'll find a place to put him, for the night. And then we could, get him back out during the daytime and see if he'll fly away. And so we start walking and the bird, my daughter starts saying, I'll carry him home. And she's really just kind of letting him stand on her hands. And I'm like, no, because as soon as we cross the street, he's going to fly off and get hit by a car. And that's not what I want to deal with. And so I said, here, I'll hold him. And so I'm cradling him, as snugly as you can without hurting it. But the bird starts flapping and ends up flying out of my hands and landing in a little bush. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe he wants to be in that bush. But no, immediately starts hopping back after us and yelling the whole time. And just as this is happening, the door of the house that we're by opens up and the woman there calls my daughter by name, which is only slightly surprising because everybody knows my daughter and I don't know how. I joke about being internet famous, but my daughter is evidently a legit celebrity. And so that was my daughter. It turns out it's her art teacher from school. And she goes, "Oh, you found him." And I'm like, what? And evidently the bird had fallen out of the nest on Mother's Day and they have been feeding it and kept it in their like screened in porch. And it squeezed out of a gap in the screen because it's an old crappy screen and was out flying around and finally decided that freedom wasn't all that it was cut out to be and saw two people walking by and was like, all right, you guys can feed me. And her son came out and he had like a little bowl with like some hamburger in it and was feeding the bird. The bird was just housing it down. and all of that. And then he was much quieter now that he had his food, and that they brought him back inside. So I'm not taking care of a baby bird tonight, which is good.
Aww.
And yeah, this bird will very soon be learning to fly and hopefully going back to being a regular wild creature. But it is also a common starling. It's not like they'll be missed. But that was our fun little adventure today.
I want to congratulate you for having a story shorter than mine.
I mean, that is a difficult task for me to do.
And I acknowledge I rambled, but
yeah, it's a big deal having a computer blow up, especially with like you trying so hard to like fix it, and every step you make to try to make the situation better, it seemed to make it worse. Until you bought a new computer, and here you are.
Yeah, basically it was like, okay, so the computer will limp along until I bought something to clone it, and then decide it's not going to boot, and then I buy a new computer, and then it's like, no, the disk is just going to die. It's like it was waiting to thwart me at every possible step. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll all be. There's enough geeks in ACP that we will sniff around for hopefully a good professional solution that you can get your data back. But especially,
I mean, I suppose so. I'm just enough of a privacy fiend that I'm not comfortable with just handing it over to someone I don't know and say, recover this. Because I don't know what sort of thing they'll find that they'll decide is scandalous. And perhaps I'm overinflating my own sense of worth here. You know, maybe they won't care, but they might, this is the head of the Pink Pistols. Oh, well, let's.
Yeah. Also, at the same time, maybe they won't. Maybe that's also the way they clone it. They don't really actually see the actual images. It's just, did it do it or did it not? And whatever's on there is on there.
I guess. I don't know. I would be more comfortable handing it over to someone I know.
All I know is I smoke grease paint and latex. Oh, come on. That was a good clown porn joke.
Oh, okay. I misheard you because it sounded like you said you smoke grease paint and latex.
No, smell.
It was just, okay, weird. I'm not surprised by this. I just don't know what to do with that information.
Whatever gets me through the night.
Basically, yes.
You know what? On that note, the main topic is there is no main topic. We debated talking about a main topic, and then it really wasn't that strong of a topic, and we both got talking about it, and it's one of those like, we are not experts or have a firm grasp on this. So
yeah. So let me just gloss over this for our listeners because I want to address it. We wanted to talk about the whole business regarding SCOTUS, specifically Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and the sending the assault weapons ban back. And the thing is, Weer'd and I were both confused as to what was going on because there's a state level one and then there's a Naperville one, Naperville being a city in Illinois. And it was like, hey, Weer'd, I don't quite know what's going on because I've had a heck of a day. And Weer'd goes, now that you mention it, I don't really know what's going on either. So we just decided we wouldn't waste your time by talking about a bunch of stuff we didn't understand. So we aren't ignoring the topic. It's just we don't really know what to do with it, especially since it all seems to boil down to, SCOTUS sent it back rather than intervening.
But also at the same time, this was an injunction. This was not the open case. This was not like when Healy versus Warman, which was an earlier assault weapons ban case that was going to head to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court just sent it back, which meant that the lower court was going through, and that was the end of the case. And we will never hear of that one ever again because it is settled. And according to case law, the the Mara Healy's assault weapons ban is constitutional. Thankfully, there's a new challenge, but because of NYSERPA, and the NYSERPA standards will hopefully be enacted, and fingers crossed they will get rid of it. And again, my hopes are that the Supreme Court will see that there's this one from Illinois, which now I'm confused on how much is it being what's being looked at and at what level. And then there's the one from California, and there's also the one from Massachusetts. Why don't they just put them all together so they can just make a giant ruling on assault weapons bans in the United States, and hopefully say that it's unconstitutional because, hey, when the ratification of the Second Amendment went through, they didn't care what type of guns you owned, and there was no restrictions on what kind of guns you owned. And then furthermore, then the cartridge was invented, and then the repeating rifle was invented, and then the machine gun was invented, and at no point did people jump in and say, hey, maybe we should pump the brakes a little bit. And it wasn't until the NFA that any sort of restrictions on what guns people should own or could own went through. So, and even then the NFA itself was really just a paywall, not a direct restriction. If you had the money, you could own whatever you wanted. And
so yeah, that's as much of a main topic as you're going to get from us tonight.
Yes, yeah, we're cooked. We've been busy. Aaron's been exceptionally busy. I'm glad you're here, Aaron.
Thanks.
I was not sure that was going to happen, but we got a good show and we got lots of topics, so therefore we don't need a main topic. And speaking of the NFA, Matt from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns is going to talk to us about the impending reclassification of pistol braces and some suggestions of what to do if you have one in the collection.
Hi, this is Matt with Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns here. Figured I'd give you guys a quick little rundown on the screwery that's coming down. So some of you, well, hopefully most of you have already heard that on January 31st, 2023, ATF published quote-unquote final rule for pistol braces. Pretty much what it comes down to is every pistol brace is an SBR, lots of weasel language, all that other stuff. They gave a 120-day forbearance window, which means, yes, you already possessed it before that time. The problem is, technically, no transfer of the item was supposed to be allowed after the day that rule was published. So, what that means for anybody who wants to do a forbearance registration under the NFA, if that is legal in your state, unfortunately for some people it is not. Really what it comes down to is, hey, you have to get that registered. ATF has already said they are closing the window at 12:01 a.m. on May 31st. A lot of people are saying June 1 is the day. No. They're closing the window at 12:01 a.m. on May 31st. You can no longer apply for the forbearance at that time. You have to, per them, disassemble and dispose of or destroy the brace, make it so they no longer can attach. A couple of things I should probably point out for people, just because this is a mess. With the SBA3 brace that uses a collapsible brace on the back so you can fit to a bunch of different arm lengths, because some people have longer arms where it's better mounted further back or further forward, what works for you. That uses a standard mil-spec tube, which means if you pull that off, you could throw just a regular stock on, which would put you in the probability or possibility of ending up with constructive intent. And technically, based on some of the stuff they are saying, you probably shouldn't even still possess the brace. So if you have a family member who's not a gun person, doesn't have anything to do with guns, or doesn't have AR pistol, possibly storing it at their house would be the best legal remedy, because, yeah, it is a very unfortunate situation. And unfortunately, as of the time of this recording, which this is May 22nd, so we're looking less than 9 days on this. We have yet to have a single injunction put in place by the court, and one court actually find, no, this is allowed and continue it going forward. The lawsuit is not over. None of the lawsuits are, but not a single one has put a pause on it. The Congress has not voted to pause this using the Congressional Review Act, which honestly, the odds of it getting through the Senate are low to non-existent, and non-existent is the odds of Biden signing said bill. So we're kind of at the point where you're out of options. And keep in mind, if you do choose to use the forbearance window and register it, that now makes it an NFA item, and you need to work with it in regards as an NFA item. That means it is treated like a short barrel rifle because that's what you're registering it as. And short barrel rifles and machine guns, you must ask ATF permission in advance before taking it across state lines. That's honestly a major problem for me because I have 2 state lines within 5 miles of where I live. So I hate that part of the NFA. And I also hate GCA 68 where I can't go to the big store across the river and just buy a gun and take it home. Unless it's a long gun. This is a mess, and the courts have not done anything to change it. So, figured you guys should probably know that. And just in case you're wondering, ATF is currently requiring a notarized documentation of disposition dated before January 31st to put any braced item into a trust. So if you have it in your trust beforehand, but it's not notarized, that's not good enough. I'm kind of stunned that they actually believe people are notarizing every single thing added into a trust, but that's what the ATF is requiring on that. So that means you can't put it in a trust so your spouse can have access to it with you. That's an unfortunate situation, so you can't just throw it in a common gun safe where both you and your spouse have access. You need to have it in a place where only you have access to said item. If the other person has access, you're looking at other legal issues there. This is the ugly part about the ATF and the NFA, and like I said, it hasn't been stopped, and don't expect any quick conclusion. Look at the bump stock ruling. Took 6 years to get a solid ruling from the court saying, hey, yeah, no, you're not allowed to do this. But it's not just one court. Now we've got 2 courts saying that. The 5th and 6th Circuit both agree. But we still don't have a final determination because it has to go to SCOTUS. So does SCOTUS deny the appeal, which says the 5th and 6th stand? But that doesn't change where the other circuits have said, oh no, this is perfectly fine. So we're getting into some screwy situations here. Maybe if you get involved politically, we can change the NFA to make this actually a possibility and not a problem. But again, you have to be involved. Call your political representatives, your congresspeople, your senators. Let them know about this. Because you're looking at 10 years and a $250,000 fine per item. This is disgusting and despicable, and there's no other option. It really comes down to you either destroy the item, you get rid of it, or you register it. That's really the options you're at. Now, they will say, well, you can put an upper on it and whatnot, but what do you do with the uppers you already have built? Do you destroy the barrels? Yeah, that's also not the greatest option. The only one positive aspect I can say about this registration window is they are saying they are already NFA items. So they are recognizing that the pre-existing serial number and manufacturer information on the gun that is pre-existing will continue to be what the weapon is registered as. So you don't have to go and engrave it, putting in the markings of your trust or anything else like that. I would love to see this be used to change the NFA so all machine guns, everything else, you do a Form 1 for a short barrel rifle, short barrel shotgun, any of it, it just registers using the initial markings of the manufacturer. Now, if you're doing something from scratch, yeah, you'll have to mark it no matter what. But if there's pre-existing markings on the guns, those should already be recognized. Hopefully we can use this to change that, but that's no guarantee. Again, this is not legal advice. This is just the stuff I found out in my looking, and honestly, I think everyone should be at least kind of aware of what you're looking at for the legal minefield. So long, have a great day, and I really wish we weren't here. Let's hope between now and when this airs, the courts do something, but I wouldn't guarantee it.
This actually reminded me of a tweet I saw last week, and so I scrolled through my Twitter feed, and so this name, I've referenced him before, Kostas Moros, who is a fantastic Second Amendment resource and advocate on Twitter. And so on the 19th, so last Friday, he was responding to the ATF. And, the ATF was going, hey, did you know there are options for compliance with ATF final rule addressing stabilizing braces? Remove the short barrel and attach a larger rifle barrel, permanently remove and dispose of the brace, turn it in, destroy it, or register tax-free, et cetera, et cetera. And he focuses on that thing that's just hidden right there in the middle. And he says, and dispose? You guys are about to declare even an unattached plastic brace to be an SBR, aren't you? And at the time, well, I'm not going to say I thought he was full of it, but the more I learned, especially listening to Matt's segment, the more I really think, yeah, I think they're headed that way. I think they may do that. It wouldn't surprise me if they declare just possessing the brace means you've got an SBR. I wouldn't put it past the bastards.
Well, I mean, given how underhanded they were, that Steve Bock was in front of Congress, and I think it was Thomas Massey actually said, like, did Congress pass a law? Like, these were legal, and you approved them. Yes, that's correct. Did Congress pass a law that made them illegal? No. Well, then why is there a change? Well, it's not that we changed our mind. It's that the braces changed, and we were changing with all that. And then he reached under his desk and pulled out the original pistol stabilizing brace, the one that was actually sent to ATF and said, what do you think of this? Can we sell these? And the ATF said, yes, you can. And then now they're saying, and he said, can I put this on my pistol? And he goes, well, wishy-washy. I'm not going to answer that because the answer is, of course not. We'll shoot your dog. And so, but it's, again, Chevron deference. Hopefully that will go away from another SCOTUS court. And so, yeah, and it's just so underhanded and skeevy, so if you're going to do that and tell somebody, go ahead and build a factory and start making these and sell them to people. And we're talking, there's millions of people that have these pieces of plastic, and now they're going to be stuck in there. And again, note, you're hearing about this right now because you're a geek. You are a gun nut. Chances are gun owners that just have guns, and they will say, oh, what type of gun do you have? It's a 9mm. Well, thanks. That narrows it down. It's a black one. Also, thanks. It has a shoulder thing that goes up. Like, there's so many people that, don't even know. I think we've all seen that. It was from the National Geographic where it's this dude with a bandana around his face, all gangster up, and he pulls out a high point and he says, "Here's my Glock 40. I call this my problem solver." And we all laugh about it, but this dude said it with pure earnesty. Like, he thought he had a Glock. Why not? It's black. It's plastic. It's ugly. It's a Glock.
It was a high point, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a high point. Yeah, and it might not even been in 40 cal, but probably was in 40 cal because he assumed would have to buy the ammo. So yeah, but there are lots of people that probably walked into a gun shop and saw an AR pistol with a brace on it and went, "Wow, that's really cool. Can I what is this? Show me this. Can I put this on my shoulder? As a matter of fact, the ATF said you could put it on the shoulder. And that was all they needed to hear, and they went home. And they may not even be aware of any of this nonsense because, again, this is geek stuff. The newspaper's not going to talk about this. This is not going to be a huge news story. And it's only for us geeks. And these people are now going to be felons, and they're not even going to be aware of it because when they bought it, it was said it was legal, and nobody passed a law. And so, yeah. So I will say, under no circumstances would I ever advise anybody to not comply with the law. But bump stocks were illegal for a period of time, and we all know that the ATF allowed people to turn them into law enforcement and have them destroyed because they were officially declared unregistered machine guns. And we know that law enforcement got a number that can be approximated as 0 for them to dispose of. And the same thing happened when New Jersey had their assault weapons ban, where they said you could turn in your assault weapons and your illegal magazines and not face any consequences. And a number approximating 0 was turned in. Similar with Connecticut with their assault weapons ban. And so, yeah. And bump stocks are now legal again, I believe.
For the moment.
Yeah, for the moment. Yeah, they have that has been struck down. And so if by chance you had taken your bump stock off and tucked it in the back of your closet, or taken the AR that had the bump stock attached to it and tucked it in the back of the gun safe and just kind of worked around it for a couple of years, well, now you can come back out of the safe. And I'm not saying that's going to happen with pistol braces, and I'm certainly not saying that that's something that you should do, because that would be very legally ill-advised to simply tuck that pistol with the brace on it in the back of the safe, or pop the brace off and put it in a box somewhere in a deep, dark closet somewhere that would be very, very difficult for people searching your home to find. That would be horribly ill-advised and going against the letter and the spirit of the law. But so definitely don't do that. That's my advice to you.
I'm just laughing because I'm reminded of that one scene from A Fistful of Yen, the movie within the movie called Kentucky Fried Movie.
Yes.
And so you've got the Bruce Lee type person, and he's talking with someone, and they're discussing what they're going to do to defeat the bad guy, and she's pointing out all of the different bugs that are in the room. And at one point he says something questionable, that sort of tips the hand. And so he then knowingly reaches up, grabs the boom mic above his head, pulls it down, and speaks clearly into it, but that would be wrong. And yeah, that's how I feel with your topic. It's like, well, no, I mean, I I'm not going to tell you not to obey the law, because that would be wrong.
I was just saying, if on your Minecraft server you happen to have constructed an AR-15 pistol with a pistol stabilizing brace, then your Minecraft character might want to build a gun safe and put it in the very, very back of that gun safe. But of course, I'm only talking about the game of Minecraft, there is. I'm trying to remember what the name of the version of. There's a version of NetHack where there's firearms. So yes, in that version as well, there might be pistol stabilizing braces. I don't know. I don't play it.
Aaron Intro David. May I suggest a reference to how shotguns are not on the NFA, but legally should be? Okay, Weer'd.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. In this segment, I'd like to talk about the ubiquitous shotgun. When it comes to firearms, a good argument can be made that the shotgun is the most versatile of them all. Whether loaded with lead shot for use on smaller birds, small game, or clay pigeons, steel shot for waterfowl, buckshot for home defense, or slugs for large game, a shotgun can successfully be used for all these applications. Shotguns are available in a wide variety of different bore sizes, actions, and configurations depending on their primary intended use, but there can be considerable overlap between these roles. When learning about shotguns, bore size may be confusing at first. Other than the diminutive 410, shotgun barrel diameter is defined by a gauge number. This value is traditionally the number of lead balls the diameter of the bore that total 1 pound. So for 12 gauge, it would require 12 balls, where 20 gauge would take 20. The exception, as previously mentioned, is 410 shotguns. They use a caliber designation instead. By the standard system, they'd be considered just over 67 gauge. Conversely, a 12 gauge bore is around 73 caliber. When using shells loaded with multiple pellets, whether birdshot or buckshot, the chosen loads need to be patterned. This is a method of testing to make sure the density of pellets is sufficient for the purpose intended. This process is well understood and involves shooting at a large target at a specific range, such as a 4-foot square at 40 yards for birdshot. Then, counting pellet hit percentages while keeping an eye out for voids in the pattern. If firing slugs, a shotgun is sighted in using the same techniques as any rifled long gun, though often at a shorter range. There are a number of different operating mechanisms for shotguns, but the three most common these days are break open, over, under, or side-by-side double barrels, pump, and semi-auto. While popular for a long time, single-shot and bolt-action shotguns are of less interest to the buying public these days. In addition to actions, shotguns are also set up for a variety of uses. While there can be considerable overlap between them, there are specific features that benefit certain purposes. Skeet. These will have mid-length barrels, 26 inches is fairly popular, and are often of lighter construction than other shotguns. Double barrel and semi-auto actions dominate this type. Trap shotguns will have longer barrels, otherwise they're similar in setup to skeet shotguns. Barrels of over 32 inches in length aren't uncommon. When going for small game such as squirrels or rabbits, shotguns will often have slightly shorter barrels, 22 to 24 inches, and will usually weigh more, being of heavier construction. Pump and semi-auto now seem to be the most prevalent here, though doubles are still fairly common. Longer, 28 to 30 inch barreled semi-autos rule the roost for the purpose of hunting waterfowl. As 18 inches is the legal minimum without getting into the National Firearms Act of 1934, most shotguns designed for defensive purposes have 18.5-inch barrels. They may also have additional tactical elements, such as attached shell holders, adjustable stocks, slings, barrel heat shields, and even bayonet lugs. The most popular type in this configuration is pump action. Now to take a closer look at shotgun chokes. The concept of choke in shotgun barrels is quite old and, once understood, is fairly simple. Put plainly, a choke is a tapered constriction near the end of a shotgun barrel which is designed to slightly compress the shot column and delay the spread of pellets. The tighter the choke, the greater the amount of compression, relatively speaking, which provides a corresponding improvement in effective range. There are a variety of chokes available, but from loosest to tightest, the 5 most common are cylinder, improved cylinder, modified, improved modified, and full. Most modern shotguns have removable chokes so they can be changed out as needed. Depending on the intended use of the shotgun, one of these will be optimal, though often one of the adjacent chokes will be acceptable as well. Each of these chokes has a specific constriction with a predictable effect on shot pattern at different ranges and therefore best use conditions. Cylinder bore has no constriction. The barrel is the same internal diameter to the muzzle. Improved cylinder reduces that by 0.010 inches, modified by 0.02 inches, improved modified by 0.025 inches, and a full choke reduces that by 0.030 inches. To give an idea for the best use or purpose of these chokes, cylinder, applying no constriction, is best for close range, such as in a home defense shotgun. Improved cylinder is preferred for trap and skeet shooting, though if longer shots are needed, modified may be a better choice. For bird hunting, modified and full are the most common options, depending on range. Being able to accurately judge distance is one of the most important factors, whether bird hunting or shooting clay pigeons. Most people have a hard time with this, causing them to shoot either ahead of or behind their target. To quote Bruce Bowlen, author of the Orvis Wingshooting Handbook, "My experience as an instructor has led me to believe that most shooters tend to use too much choke rather than too little. This is directly related to most folks' tendency to overestimate range and is particularly true when the targets are overhead." Many removable choke tubes are identified by the use of notches at the muzzle end, so choke type can be identified quickly and easily. Fixed choke barrels may have marks at the muzzle, but more likely they'll be marked near the breech with the other barrel markings. If a removable choke has 5 notches, that generally means cylinder bore, or no choke. Improved cylinder will have 4 notches, modified 3 notches, improved modified 2 notches, and full chokes will have 1 notch. For easier installation and removal of threaded choke tubes, choke wrenches of various types are available. Everything from a simple stamped metal card to fancier crank-driven systems. Hopefully, this helps with understanding different shotguns and chokes, their uses, and their effect on shot pattern. There are many different options in the shotgunning world, both in form and function. As such, there should be something for everyone.
Pistols put holes in people. Rifles put holes through people. Shotguns at the right range with the right load will physically remove a chunk of
Sugar.
off your opponent and throw that
Sugar.
on the floor.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. We're always looking for people interested in submitting posts to the blog, so please check out the site. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the name Brena Bock. That's BRENA-BOCK. I'm also in anthologies published under my actual name. Look for David Bock on Amazon. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
That was an excellent segment, David, and I huge bonus points for the Clint Smith clip and the editing.
So first of all, I thought that was funny, but at the same time, I was irritated because that's how I was going to introduce the segment. And then at the very end, there's that. It's like, well, crap. Can't do that. All right, I'll just do it sloppy like Weer'd wants.
Yes. Because before this, we were talking. That's specifically what I wrote. Is Aaron intro David? May I suggest renting out shotguns are not on the NFA, but legally should be.
And then I said, but they are in the NFA. There's a specific mention of SBSs.
Mm-hmm. But it's not it's not the short-barreled shotguns that I was talking about. It's the destructive devices. And the NFA specifically states that anything that has a bore larger than 50 caliber is considered a destructive device. And as David notes, anything above a 410, which is almost 50 caliber, is bigger than 50 cal, and so that needs a sporting purpose exemption, and which is crap and garbage because it's sporting purpose exemption, and people who do not engage in shooting sports are the people who get to pick what is a legitimate shooting sport possible, because there are gobs and there's all sorts of guns that you could use for sporting purpose. I mean, I've seen Ian and Carl on In Range participate in a machine gun match where they were running around with submachine guns and shooting targets. It's a sport. They were shooting it for score. It looked challenging. It looked like fun. And of course, you've got Jerry Michalik with his crazy, auto loading extended magazine shotgun and all that. But of course, that's not sporting purpose because 3-gun. How could that possibly be a sport?
I mean, I'm thinking Jerry Michalik himself is an NFA violation because the man can shoot a revolver faster than I would say most or nearly all people can shoot a semi-auto. I mean, he sounds like he's full auto. I've got to imagine for his world record shooting of the 625 45 ACP revolver. I can imagine the cyclic rate on that is not too much further off than a Thompson submachine gun, because that's a very slow chugging gun. It's just, we need to Form 3 his index finger.
I mean, honestly speaking, since the bump stocks were declared machine guns, why couldn't Jerry's finger? but shotguns, most shotguns occupy that little rift that is occupied also by your African big game cartridges. You could just go out and buy a Holland and Holland double rifle in 600 Nitro Express, and that is above 50 caliber, and you can have it because that is a big game sporting cartridge, and shooting animals is absolutely acceptable, but shooting paper in a 3-gun match is not, because reasons. And so that was just something I wanted to touch on. And since we are bagging on the NFA, I thought we would continue on how stupid and horrible the NFA is, and it needs to go away.
I mean, absolutely, and we need to get rid of the Hughes Amendment and GCA 68 and whatever that thing was that the first President Bush did about the import restrictions with 922R. Whole bunch of things. But first we have to deal with the current firearm prohibition. So first things first, later things later, which would have been a fantastic segue to something, but we have nothing to say. Well, we have a segment, but it doesn't segue.
That's true. I mean, as I have said many times before, probably on this show and all that, we didn't lose our rights overnight. We're not going to get them back overnight. We lost them stepwise. We're going to have to gain them back stepwise. Hopefully we can maybe jump over a few steps instead of doing it just one at a time, but we'll see what we can do. Speaking of past shows, I love it when listeners want to join in on the show, and I present to you listener and patron member Miles with an observation about something Aaron and I spoke about in a past show.
Hi, this is Miles from Western Massachusetts. Since this is my first segment, I will tell you a little bit about myself. I am a licensed carrier in the state of Massachusetts since the early 90s, since I got out of the Army. And yes, Aaron, you are an E1 at least when you join the military and start basic training. You can be as high up as an E3, I believe, is the highest you can get and start basic, depending on your college and all the other situations that you can get promoted when you sign up. The purpose of this segment is to talk about the concept that was brought up during the Club Q shooting of the run, hide, fight not really being something that works. And for free shooters, that really is not the greatest concept, because these animals, which is what they really are more like a predator, where you run, they attack. What's the first thing you're told when you encounter a mountain lion, a bear, a wolf? It doesn't matter what wild animal. It's don't run. You may back away slowly. You may not do anything other than that, but you never run. So starting off with run doesn't work. So that is the purpose of this, is what should you do? Well, the first thing really has to start with is whenever you enter any public place, because that's where free shooting is happening, are public places. You have to assess your surroundings. Just walking through the door. If you are listening to this podcast, you are already somebody who cares about your own welfare and the welfare of others. So the first thing you need to do is know what your surroundings are. Because if you don't, then you're already starting on your back foot before you even have time to do anything else. So when you enter a restaurant, a mall, a park, you have to assess your surroundings. Know, is there a place to take cover? Is there a place to hide? Not that I'm saying you should run to a place to hide. I'm saying if you need time to assess and react, you need to have a place to at least not draw attention to yourself. Because my thought on this is you have to assess your situation before it ever happens. But as long as you already have that, you have a concept of what you might be able to do if a situation ever happens. So you know your surroundings. You know what's around you. You know if you have a weapon. For example, yesterday I had to go to my son's track meet. That meant I was going onto school grounds, which means in the state of Massachusetts and really the country, I am not allowed to have a firearm. I'm not allowed to have pocket knives, but that is the rule. And if I want to keep my permits, in Massachusetts we do have to have those, I need to not become a felon by bringing those things onto school grounds and getting caught. So I don't bring them onto school grounds. But at the same time, I can look around and say, okay, is there a place for me to, conceal myself while I figure out what I can do? Is there any improvised weapons that I can grab? Stuff along those lines. And this, like I said, track meet, parks, restaurants, any of these places where these spree shootings happen. Or any other violent act for that matter. Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a spree shooting. It just has to be a violent altercation. Because it could be somebody going after their estranged wife. And you may have to step in and save them. We're not saying it's always a spree shooting, but you need to be able to know what the situation is and how you can react. Then, if you ever find yourself in a situation, you need to, if need be, find a place to cover or conceal yourself while you assess the situation. And then once you assess the situation, you need to react. Now, that reaction can come in many, many forms. It could be the gentleman in the Club Q shooting, where he ran up and grabbed the drag tag on the back of the guy's gear and dragged him off his feet, took his weapon, and beat him with it. He assessed what was happening. He realized the guy was wearing military-style gear that had the drag tag on the back, and he knew if he ran up and grabbed that, he could basically manhandle the guy to the ground, which he did. Or you could be in the situation like Eli Dickett. He assessed the situation. He pulled out his handgun, braced himself up to a post, which was probably his cover and concealment as well, and he eliminated the attacker without any other casualties caused by him, because he assessed that he could take the shot safely. So what I'm saying is know your surroundings before a situation happens. Then when the situation ever was to happen, you take the time to assess the situation, hopefully from a good place of cover or concealment. But if you can't get that, you deal. But if you can, cover and concealment, assess, and react. And sometimes that reaction is just pulling out your phone and calling 911 because there's nothing else you can do. Because even a phone that you're not talking to that's dialed 911 is going to let the police know that there's a situation and that they need to respond to the location of that phone. That sometimes is all you can do, but you did something. And it may not save your life, but it may save the lives of others as well. It's taking that time to be situationally aware, and then assessing and then taking action. It is not just blindly reacting by running away and becoming the prey for that predator. There are other people out there who are going to do that anyways, who are the sheep, who are just going to take the time to run. And you need to be, as the safety conscious, the person who is willing to take the time to be prepared for the situation. You need to have, not just to be prepared to deal with the situation. You need to think and react, not just react, because just reacting is what gets people killed. That is my thoughts on this. It is the wrong thing to do if you are listening to this podcast, to just react by running and hiding, and if they find you, fight back. No, you need to think it, assess your situation, and then react. And hey, it may be running, but at least you know that what your odds are and your chances are if you take the time to assess your situation before you just blindly run away. Because most likely you're not going to blindly run away. You're going to run in such a way that you have a better chance. So, in conclusion, be prepared, be aware of your surroundings, and assess the situation before you react. Oh, by the way, Weer'd, not only do I listen to the blooper reel while driving a delivery truck around western Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont, I'm recording this segment while doing the same thing. Have a good day.
So one of the factors on the run is, he's absolutely correct, and I 100% agree with everything Miles said in this. But one thing to note is that that spree killers often choose a venue, and it's often a restricted area so that people have a difficulty escaping. But there's a chance on some things like a school or a mall where there might be a shooting and there might be lots of areas where there are not clear lines of sight, so that you might be hearing gunshots from one direction and seeing an exit in the other. And again, the choice of what the best choice is up to you, but I would say the safest choice would be to get out of Dodge ASAP and start calling in the police at why you are leaving for that. But there might be...
That's something that I have said about pretty much everything involved in prepping. The best way to survive an emergency is not to be there in the first place. And that applies to gunfights, and that applies to hurricanes, which is why I evacuate. I would rather spend the time and the gas money and be safe rather than risk it and, I got a Category 5 bearing down on me. And so you can apply that same reasoning to spree killer situations. Just try not to be there. And that can be as simple as, I got a bad feeling, I'm not going to be here. Or, as Miles said, situational awareness. Know where the exits are. Know where you can take cover. Have a plan, really, is what it comes down to. It's all about prepping. Be prepared. Have a plan. Know if you have to run, where you're going to run.
And one of the things he also alluded into is talking about when you're entering a different area, a different location. And that's something that I'm sure he didn't coin it, but it's said constantly by John Correa in the Active Self-Protection YouTube channel and podcast, is transitional spaces. When you are going from one area to another, and those are... You should be very, very aware of when you are transitioning from one space to another, because those are the times when, look, you can't expect to be like at full red alert all the time with your head on a swivel. I mean, that's just exhausting and all that. There are times when you are just going to look down at your phone and look at that text that you just got, or just be like looking up at the birds and the trees and things like that. You can get out of that, but try to be aware of the transitional spaces. When you're walking down the street to the convenience store. When you go out of your front door, don't have your head buried in your phone. Have your head up, look around, look out the window before you open the door, and just make sure that there's nothing off before you leave. And then when you get to the store, peek through the door first, and then when you open the door, have a look around, see what's going on, see if anything's off. Make sure you're not just walking headlong into a robbery. There's all sorts of areas with all that. When you're walking around a corner, you don't have to pie that corner like your SEAL Team 6, but just be aware so that you are not nose down in your phone as you walk into an ambush. It's just good advice to have, is your situational awareness doesn't have to be all the darn time, but make sure you're using it when it counts.
So anyone who has listened to this podcast for any amount of time knows my amazing facility for remembering names, as in I don't. And that's sort of a recurring joke or motif. And a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that one lawyer whose name I can't remember who crusaded against video games. And so Oddball, being a gamer, knew exactly who I was talking about, and he's going to tell us who Jack Thompson was, what he did, and where he is now.
Welcome to Oddball's Corner Pocket. In episode 249, Weer'd and Aaron mentioned a lawyer that went on a campaign to fight violent video games back in the 90s and 2000s, but could not remember his name at the time. His name is Jack Thompson. Let's talk about him a bit and how I feel about the idea that violent video games cause violence. Jack Thompson is a Florida lawyer and pro-censorship activist that started his career going after music with explicit language. It being the early 90s, his usual targets were rap artists like 2 Live Crew, NWA, and Ice-T. His campaign was actually largely responsible for getting Time Warner to pull Ice-T's album that contained the song Cop Killer. In the late 90s, he decided to shift focus to violent video games. Games like Doom, Wolfenstein 3D, and Mortal Kombat were taking the world by storm, and he was convinced that the kind of realistic violence portrayed in the games were causing kids to become murderers. In fact, he filed a lawsuit on behalf of the parents of 3 kids that were killed in a school shooting in Kentucky in '97. The case was dismissed for, quote, failing to present a legally recognizable claim, unquote. Undeterred, he continued his crusade, both in and outside of the courtroom. Of particular note was his campaign against Grand Theft Auto 3 and Manhunt. GTA 3 went on to become a huge success, and I'm sure you're aware of its sequels, while Manhunt failed. Frankly, I'm guessing that a number of the sales of Manhunt were actually because of him, as most folks that played it, along with the critics, agreed that it wasn't particularly good. While he filed a number of lawsuits against various video game companies and retailers, I'm unaware of him actually winning any. The closest he came was Best Buy agreeing not to sell GTA Vice City to anyone under 18, which was already their policy. Finally, the state of Florida had had enough of his nonsense, and in 2008 he was disbarred for various actions, including regularly filing baseless lawsuits, practicing law in states where he did not possess a law license, harassment, and straight up lying to the court. In 2009, he stated he would resume legal practice, largely because he didn't recognize any power of the Florida Bar Association. But I don't think that there's been any evidence that he's actually practiced since then. So that's a very quick rundown on the man. But what about his argument? After all, he isn't exactly the only one to have declared violent video games as a menace to society. Is there any truth to this? There's been many studies done on the subject, and, well, there's a number of them that say that they do, and a number that say that they don't, and a few that say that they actually reduce violence. Really, you could come to any conclusion that you want by choosing the study that you like. I think the truth is actually really easy to come to. I think everyone would agree that realistic violent video games really came to the scene in the mid-90s when Doom, Mortal Kombat, and so forth came out. They quickly became extremely popular to the point that by the early 2000s, AAA games like Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, and the like are at least as popular as the latest summer blockbuster movies. With the meteoric rise of these games, if they caused violence, surely we would see an increase in violence, right? Not so much. Starting in the early 90s, we've seen a rather dramatic decrease in violence, even when you account for the recent increase in the past couple years. Incidentally, Wolfenstein 3D came out in '92. Since then, video games have only become more realistic, I'd say probably more violent, and more popular. I won't necessarily say that violent video games reduce violence, but I think it's fairly easy to say that it disproves the idea that they cause violence. After all, correlation does not necessarily mean causation, but causation requires correlation, and it just ain't there. I wish I could say that this argument has died, but it's still around. In fact, I heard a pro-gun YouTuber blame violent video games just recently. Of course, the most famous example of the pro-gun community trying to shift blame from guns to video games, also known as shifting the blame from one inanimate object to another, would be Wayne LaPierre's speech after Sandy Hook. The response? I saw a lot of two-way fence sitters that liked video games decide, well, since you've just put a target on our backs / attacked us, to heck with you. And remember, it's been violent video games were causing the end of the world. And before that, it was that evil rap music, or violent moves, or comic books, or even if you go back far enough, fiction books. The unfortunate truth is that there have always been violent people that are willing to do bad and nasty things. I hope this was interesting. As always, if you want to read more of my thoughts, I write at gunscarstech.com. If you have any comments, questions, or thoughts for future segments, I can be reached at Oddball at gunscarstech.com or on the ACP Facebook page. Until next time, have a good one.
I'm honestly surprised Oddball didn't mention the satanic panic over Dungeons & Dragons in the 1980s, because I lived through that, and I was that kind of a gamer. I'm more of a tabletop gamer than role-playing gamer, and I remember just the absolute hysteria about how allegedly there were actual spells in like the Dungeon Master's Guide, and there were devils and demons in the monster manual, and clearly this was all satanic. And it was so. Here's how I showed my mother that it wasn't satanic. I had her sit in on a game, and we were first level characters, and we were fighting giant toads, and she got bored and left. And that's how I convinced my mother that D&D wasn't satanic. I just bored the crap out of her with combat.
Yes. Especially level 1 combat. Oh, this is tedious as a gamer. Can I gain some skill sets, please? Can my character not suck? Oh, by the way, Oddball mentioned 2 Live Crew, and I know you don't listen to the show, so I kept all of the Full Metal Jacket references towards the end of the last show in there, which of course the lady of the evening in Saigon was referenced with 2 Live Crew with I don't even know what the name of the song is, but the "Oh Me So Horny, Me Love You Long Time."
I really want to say it was Me So Horny, but I don't know.
It probably was. I don't know. They weren't that good of a group, let's be honest.
The thing is, of all the 2 Live Crew songs that I remember, that wasn't the one I remember. The one that I remember, and I don't remember what the title was, but it was, 1 and 1. We had some fun in the bathroom all day and all the night. 2 and 2, 3 and 3. And it was just, okay, first some basic arithmetic and then increasingly nasty sex, all right? This is catchy?
I'd forgotten about that one, but yeah, we've talked about this, like, it was probably like way back in like the first year we were doing the show, and I'm like, oh, I did remember I heard that one back in the 90s. And yeah, that one's not bad. I don't know what it's called, but it's filthy. But also, we both listen to Lords of Acid, and I listen to Gigi Allen. So guess what? We call that tame stuff, just like Mother used to make. Oh, and one of the things I also wanted to point out is Oddball mentioned the question about, do video games make people violent? And I got hearkened into a study that I heard about, where essentially it was a Canadian group and they wanted to do a study on the effects of pornography on a person's brain. And and they wanted to do the effective person brain, and they quickly found that when looking for men in their 20s who have never consumed pornography, we couldn't find any. They legitimately couldn't get a control group. And I kind of feel that violent video games are kind of like that, especially given the proclivity of violent felons to be almost exclusively dominated by the male persuasion. Is the number of young men who have never played a violent video game, especially as the timeline goes on and video games become more mainstream and available. And especially things like Grand Theft Auto. The Grand Theft Auto games are amazing, especially the further on they go, the more cinematic they get, and the more star-studded cast they have. And it's one of those like, how can that not be a zeitgeist? And then there's games like Manhunter, of which are I never played it, but in reading about Jack Thompson years ago, saw that Manhunter was one of the games that he had a serious problem with and wrote many articles about. And so I looked it up and I found you can find people playing it on YouTube. And number one, the graphics are horrendously dated, which you can get around if the gameplay is good. The gameplay is not good. It is just gross out gore. It's essentially I think it predates the Saw games, but essentially it's the idea is that some unseen antagonist has essentially abducted a serial killer and wants him to kill people for his own excitement. And so you're controlling this serial killer, executing these people in these various situations for the observation of a third party that is threatening you. And it doesn't look very interesting. So I never played it, and I don't want to. And there's a reason why it failed and it moved on. It's not because it's gory or violent. But if violent video games made us violent, you wouldn't be hearing me right now because you'd be dead.
Well, I can tell you, I know that, one anecdote does not equal data, but in my particular circumstance, violent video games kept me from perpetuating violence in real life because, it wasn't too long ago when the situation in the house was just full of yelling and drama, and I would just load up. I was playing Space Marine, and so I would... I don't remember which chapter it was, but people who have played Space Marine, there's that one scene when your character gets to the bridge and has to fend off all the chaos demons. And I would load that one up, and I would crank the difficulty to max. And I would just go through it until I won. And I would particularly love getting to the support weapon and then yanking it off the tripod and walking with it and just killing demon after demon. And that was very cathartic for me. And so, because I got to kill pixels in a very violent manner on screen, I was able to let go of my anger and then deal with my family situation in a calmer manner. It may not have been healthy, but it was certainly calmer.
I mean, it seems pretty healthy compared to any of the alternatives you might have been thinking about. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up because you reminded me. I actually talked to Oddball, admonished to poor Oddball. I had a great point to say when you mentioned you were going to do Jack Thompson. Is I said talk about Desert Bus, and Oddball laughed and knew exactly what I was talking about. And those who listen to the blooper reel will hear me saying that to him. But I said talk about Desert Bus, and so Desert Bus was a video game that was thought up by Penn and Teller and the Magic Group, and in case there's any other Penn and Teller, and they and it was after Attorney General under Bill Clinton, Janet Reno, said that people should be making video games instead of these violent fantastical video games. They should be making video games that are more like real life. To which they just had a dry cackle about it and said, okay. And so they made up this game called Desert Bus. And the premise of Desert Bus is you are the driver of a bus that goes between Las Vegas and Flagstaff, Arizona, which is hundreds of miles across the desert. And the road is arrow straight. And they built into the bus that one of the brakes hangs up a little bit in the front, causing the bus to shimmy slightly, but at odd times. So therefore, you can't do anything to automate the steering and put the bus on autopilot. You have to physically be controlling the bus because it will shimmy off course over the course of the drive, and it takes hours to get from Las Vegas to Flagstaff, and there's nothing but cactus and sagebrush. And of course, this was also on the Sega Genesis, so the graphics are not that great either.
I also believe that there's no way to pause it.
Correct. There was a group of people, I don't know if they're still around, but every year they would have a charity drive where they would play Desert Bus on a live stream.
Yep. They would do it for charity.
And they had multiple drivers that would switch off.
Yeah. And so I'm looking it up. It takes 8 hours of real time, and you can't automate it. You can't speed it up. And the only progress you get is that when you make it to your destination city, somewhere there's a score that bings 1.
Correct. When you leave Las Vegas and arrive in Flagstaff, you get 1 point. And then you get the option to turn around and drive back to Las Vegas for a second point. And this is one of those, there is a bus driver that drives between Flagstaff and Las Vegas and may even do it twice in a day. And that's their job, and they do that. And there are people who are listening to the podcast right now who are long haul truckers, and you are driving through an endless stretch of road delivering goods to to another part of the world. And thank you so much for doing that. And I hope that we are making this far more interesting than the mind-numbing empty roads that you may be dealing with. But that's what you're doing. And we don't want to do that. We want to play as a serial killer. We want to play as a space marine. We want to play as a knight with a sword. We want to be violently maiming people because guess what? In my day, I'm just doing nice things. I carry a gun and I never do anything with it. It's not it's not interesting in the action movie sense of the word. And so to get into these fantasy worlds, that's the point. And so, the people like Jack Thompson saying, don't do that because it's going to make people violent. Yes, people who have horrible violent fantasies probably will get super excited by violent video games. That doesn't mean the violent video games are making them violent. The violent video games are just there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was all a crazy moral panic. He is not a serious or a sane person, especially the bit about him saying that the Florida bar had no hold over him. It sounded very much like I just was watching a video today while I was working of a sovereign citizen getting arrested and just pretty much saying the officer pulled them over for speeding and they were like, all right, can I see your driver's license? I don't need a driver's license. I'm traveling. And he just immediately said, dispatch, this guy got a sovereign citizen. Sadly, that video did not involve the window being smashed open and the person being dragged screaming out the hole. That's always very cathartic for me as well.
So I just did some research, and yes, the charity still exists. It's called Desert Bus for Hope, and I've got it linked in the show notes. Last year, they drove for 6 days and 22 hours, and they raised $1,138,674. So, yeah, they're still around. I don't know when the one this year is, but they had it last year. I'm sure they're going to have it again this year. And it's amazing how much money they raised playing this boring-ass video game. One final note, because you mentioned Moral Panic, and I am going to promote, it's just a little snippet from a TV series that I like called Legion, but you don't have to know anything about the show to enjoy this segment, because this segment is about Moral Panic, and it's like 2.5 minutes, and it's narrated by John Hamm. And so if you want a very quick explanation of what moral panics are and how they work, or perhaps you want to tell other people without having to go into a long dissertation about it or link them to something they may not read, just send them this video. It's 2.5 minutes long, and they will be entertained because it's John Hamm. I could listen to that man read a phone book. So I think you will enjoy it. I highly recommend it.
Excellent. Again, that's in the show notes. And so I think we did it, Aaron. I think we made it over the finish line. We got one last thing to do, and that is to thank each and every one of our listeners, and a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To be on Patreon, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast, and you get to sign up. And again, we're not just panhandlers. We're not begging here. You're paying money for bonus content. We've got early release of the podcast. We've got the blooper reels. We've got the ACP film tracks, and we've got the ACP mag dump. I think you'll enjoy them.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I got a blog. It's called Weer'dWorld.com. That's WEERD World.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
Hang on just a minute. Okay. It's not Flagstaff, it's Tucson.
Oh well. I'm not fixing it.
I'm not saying you should.
But here's an opportunity for you to stomp my balls to mush the outro so that I'm stuck with it.
I'm Las Vegas, and he's Flagstaff. Interestingly enough, Desert Bus goes from Las Vegas to Tucson, so Weer'd isn't even on the route. Our destination cities are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Yes!